currently, we have Saquon Barkley, Tyron Smith, Kirk Cousins, Christian Wilkins, Baker Mayfield, Calvin Ridley, and Marquise Brown. So, Drew, I just want to go through these guys. Who are the best? What teams, for the players specifically, where should these guys go? So starting off with Saquon Barkley, where should Saquon go? I have two teams here, so if you say one of my teams, I got another backup one. Where should Saquon go?
Why don't you give me your two teams and I'll tell you which one's better for him?
I have the Bengals and I have the Texans.
Oh, the Texans. Oh, I love that. Can we just make that happen? Hold on. I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to call my boy D'Amico. Give me just a second. Y'all need Saquon. I love that. I wasn't even thinking the Texans. I'm like throwing all the teams through my head real quick. And I'm like, okay. The Bengals did pop because Joe Mixon may not be there, et cetera, et cetera. I love that. Texans, sign them up.
Yep, especially for a team that has the cap space that could use him. They have almost luxury cap space, right? Anytime you have a really good rookie or good young quarterback on a rookie deal, you're playing on luxury money. You're playing on borrowed time essentially for the next couple of years. So sign those couple of guys before you have to sign your quarterback. Saquon's one of those luxury guys. A running back in general is one of those luxury guys that could slide right in, be a perfect fit for CJ Stroud. And I mean, damn, that's a pretty good offense already, and you're just adding on to it.
Yeah, I mentioned a couple weeks back, I still like the fit with him in Dallas. I think they're going to try to go big game hunting at the running back position, whether it's him or Derrick Henry or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But honestly, I love the idea of take him to Texas one way or another. I love that.
I wouldn't, as a Cowboys fan, honestly, Saquon, he's kind of a polarizing player sometimes. When he's healthy, he's really good. When he's not, he's overrated. I would take Saquon on the team 9 times out of 10. I wouldn't lose sleep over it, not even a little bit.
The one thing that we do have to keep in mind also is like teams cut players all the time and then re-sign them. You know what I mean? Like teams, these players get to free agency and then they re-sign them. They just, I think it just happened with I'm not going to hold the podcast trying to remember the name, but they cut a player and then they bring him back under a different set of numbers or whatever the case may be. So don't completely rule out Saquon being back in New York. They don't have anything else over there. So that's a team.
Yeah.
New York is starting to get into dangerous like Carolina Panthers territory right now with what their roster looks like and their flexibility and all that stuff. And they got a high pick and it looks like they might take a wide receiver. Like that's not a game changing move. Like I know you love Neighbors, but that's not changing their offense next year, especially if you subtract Saquon and add Neighbors. Like your offense isn't getting any better. So we'll see. New York is sneaky
bad.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's sneaky. It's just sneaky. Like you got no path to being good in the next couple of years because your only hope is that you're just so bad that you're at the top of the draft again next year.
Yeah, I think you're swinging one way or the other, right? Brian Daboll can either make a miracle happen, and Daniel Jones has a recoup season, and he plays well. He plays like he's supposed to for $40 million a year, or you're bombing completely. It's one way or the other.
Yeah, chances are neither of those aforementioned people are there in 2025.
Yeah. Moving on to Tyron Smith, left tackle for the Cowboys. I have 2 fits for him, the Chiefs and the Rams.
I hate both of those.
You don't like either one of those?
Nah, I'd rather him come to San Francisco.
You want him to play right tackle for you?
1 year, $9 million. Let's go.
I don't know, man. Is he really he's gonna go to San Francisco just to play right tackle instead? He's a left tackle.
Maybe he wants to win a Super Bowl. He ain't gonna win no Super Bowl in Dallas.
I mean, that's why I said the Chiefs, man.
Yeah, I mean, I texted you this during the week. I'm kind of in love with the idea of him right now. If we signed him to be our right tackle and then we drafted, an interior offensive lineman at our pick, all of a sudden the biggest weakness on our team is now, excluding injury, just stacked at that point. You got a young first round talent at interior offensive lineman. You got 2, Hall of Fame left tackle, a super quality right tackle. And the Rams make a ton of sense, unfortunately, as do the Chiefs. I only hate those because those are competitors of my team. But for your purposes of placing him there. He seems like a player that's probably going to get more than his projection, probably going to get overpaid, I think.
Yeah. I think overpaid because of the injury concerns. When you look at his rankings on tackles when he's healthy, I mean, you're looking at a top 3 tackle every single year that he's played healthy. But that's the problem, is he's on and off healthy. Even this past year was considered a healthy year, and he still missed 2-3 games.
You
so
you love him for a 1 year 9, right? 1 year 10, but you love him for a 338. Like that's what I mean. Like I think that's where some team out there, because some NFL teams are just stupid, and it seems like 3 years, $38 million. That seems like a Raiders thing to do,
right?
Doesn't it? I mean, they're going to have Russell Wilson and him on the line next year. That makes a lot of sense for the Raiders, I think.
I guess it does, unfortunately, but not unfortunately for me. I don't really care, but unfortunately for them. Looking at the next one, Kirk Cousins. I have going back to the Vikings, or I have the Falcons. I already mentioned both teams earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I like him everywhere. I'm a big fan of Kirk Cousins. It's not a secret if anyone's listened to anything I've said since we've started this podcast. I love Kirk Cousins. I think he's a fit. I think he upgrades 15 to 18 teams in the NFL right now. New York could move on. Atlanta for damn sure. Tampa, if they don't re-sign Baker. The Saints getting rid of Derek Carr. There's 10 or 15 teams that would take him tomorrow, and they'd be a legitimate playoff threat. So, I really don't feel like what I've heard. I don't feel like he's going back to Minnesota. I know that's kind of gotten a little more popular here lately, but they started liquidizing and selling off pieces and stuff last year, and I think they're going to move in a different direction, especially with him coming off an injury. You don't know how he's going to bounce back. So I don't see.
But you
Minnesota.
can apply the same logic for Baker Mayfield of not getting franchise tagged. You can use the same logic for Kirk Cousins, can't you?
Yeah, except for he's hurt. It's completely different.
Yeah.
You know how Baker finished. Like,
yeah.
What Baker did the entire season. With Kirk, you're just assuming that what he's going to be showing
when he come back.
And it's different for a team that's down and out to take a risk on that. It's different than the team that's had him to bring him back. Like, we've already done this. It hasn't worked. We haven't made it to an NFC championship game. We haven't made it to a Super Bowl. We're going to bring him back and try it again. That's completely different than a team like the Patriots that have been garbage for 4 years now, bringing him in, or the Atlanta Falcons, who think they have Super Bowl talent on their roster, but starting Desmond Ridder. Like, that's a completely different situation. It's a completely different mindset to bring him in, because if it doesn't work out, at least you tried. If it doesn't work out in Minnesota, it's like, why did we do this? We already knew what we had. We already knew what we were bringing back. And I love Kirk, but to me, it doesn't make sense to bring him back and run that back when they're
Yeah,
you're going to bring back. If I'll tell you this, if the Minnesota Vikings sign Kirk Cousins, then they need to celebrate, because that means that they're extending Justin Jefferson. Because there's no reason you bring Kirk back if you're not extending Justin Jefferson. So
yeah. Moving on to the next one, Christian Wilkins. I have 2 fits from. I have the Bears and I have the Raiders.
Man, you're trying to make the Bears lights out, aren't you?
Well, they have the money for it.
I think he fits. I think he fits in a lot of places. I wouldn't even.
Yeah.
I don't. Tell me, how did you come up with those 2 teams specifically? Because I feel like there's a lot more than 2. What made you settle on those 2?
Looking at money and looking at biggest weaknesses, I think that's where you could go. But that's me.
I think any player that wants to get overpaid should call the Raiders, because they don't care about winning. They just want to sell out their stadium.
Yeah, no, it's evident, right? Yeah. Like you said, Christian Wilkins can fit in a lot of places. I could say, oh, well, if Dallas can, free up their room, you can go sign there. But, the thing is, it's about money and it's about fit. And honestly, it's about the biggest weakness on the team. And the Bears on their defense, that's the biggest weakness for their defense. And then the Raiders, they need lots of pieces. But I think they're going to go swing for at least one of the big free agents out there. And I think this could be the guy. And then I have, what's up? You got another one on that one?
It's kind of funny how we haven't talked a ton about the Raiders on these podcasts, but the more I think Kirk makes a ton of sense there. Like they don't have a quarterback on the roster, and don't come at me with Aiden O'Connell, please. Don't come at me. You guys should have kept your backup from last year, the guy that's in Denver right now. I'm sure you know the name. I can never remember these guys' names. Stidham. They should have kept Stidham over O'Connell, like Jimmy G. Like I could have told you where that was going. The Raiders, they're a threat to overpay anybody at any time. I love the idea of Kirk Cousins over there. I love the idea of Wilkins over there. So
yeah, 3 more. I got Baker Mayfield going back to Tampa, or in the situation that Kirk doesn't go to the Vikings, going to the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to pay Baker 3 years, $110 million, you might as well just bring Kirk back. I'm not exactly sure. Again, I don't think the Minnesota Vikings, y'all know I think JJ McCarthy's going there. So I'm not sure if paying and extending a quarterback at that amount of money makes sense to them. I think the Bucks, based off of the franchise tag, know what they're going to do with Baker.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense. He played well last year. I think he's going to get overpaid. I don't expect him to have repeated success that he had this year over the next couple of years. But what are you going to do? Let him walk and go into QB purgatory?
Yep, exactly. Especially with where they're picking. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, I guess you could take a swing at Bo Nix or Michael Penix, But yeah, no, I agree.
Well, that's the problem with a team like that. When you're good enough, it doesn't allow you to draft a player high enough. I mean, they're like pick 26 or 27. It just doesn't, it doesn't allow you to pick a high enough talent to change anything at the QB position.
Yeah. Calvin Ridley. I have the Giants and the Jets, 2 New York teams.
It would make sense for the Giants. They got to do something.
Yeah, and especially for, either one of the teams, they obviously both need wide receiver, right? That's part of it. But it also just makes sense because I'm working under this assumption, and I'm working under my mock draft assumption that potentially they stick with Daniel Jones for this year, and they're running with it, and they're building off of it. So you get Calvin Ridley. You might bring in a wide receiver in free agency, besides that, but I think that's where you go. You might build up the offensive line in the draft. That's my assumption of what I'm working off of.
What's the projected contract for Calvin Ridley? Is it number 1 money?
3 years, $55.5 million, 18.5 a year, $32.75 million in guarantees.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
So, it is. I mean, you're creeping to what like T. Higgins is projected. And T. Higgins is like 5 years younger. So, yeah. And then moving on to Marquise Brown, I have 2 fits. I have the Chiefs and I have the Colts.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are going to be in on every wide receiver that's available. I think they're in on pretty much anybody. But I think that Marquise Brown and Michael Pittman for the Colts, that's an interesting wide receiver combo considering what their quarterback situation is and his skill set as a young, essentially a rookie because he barely played quarterback next year. I kind of like the fit there. I think the Chiefs are going to be in on everybody, but
yeah.
I don't know what to say about Marquise Brown because with the injury to Kyler Murray and the circus clown rotation of quarterbacks they've had over there in the past couple of years, it just seems like his career has completely fallen off the cliff. But that doesn't mean that it has. It's just weird quarterback production.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this to foreshadow a little bit. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is a major cut candidate for Tennessee. And assuming he was a free agent right now, and you could bring in Hopkins or you could bring in Marquise Brown, where would you, for a team like the Colts, for a team like the Raiders, who with a quarterback situation over there, bringing someone in opposite of Devontae, who would you value? Would you value? I mean, obviously, 2 former player teammates. Would you value one over the other?
Yeah, I would. I guess it just depends on the team. If you're talking about like the Colts, the Raiders, the Chiefs,
I feel like DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a Kansas City Chief. That's kind of like my pocket signing for the Chiefs. I think he gets cut for cap savings, and the Chiefs get him because we laughed, we're like, "What the fuck are you doing going to the Titans, bro? That was stupid." And then he had a good year. So
yeah, he did. Yeah, I depending on the team and depending on how you play, I think Marquise Brown could probably be a bigger, just because of
Okay.
the burner factor, right? That's why you have him going to the Colts, right? You draft Alec Pearson a couple of years ago out of Cincinnati, because you want him to be the down the field burner guy, and he's just not. He's not that guy. But Michael Pittman's great in the short and intermediate, possession type receiver. But they don't have the burner right now. So you go out and you go get a guy like Marquise Brown, or you draft one. You get a lot of Brian Thomas Jr. getting drafted there, or you take a guy maybe in the second round who's a burner. You got lots of burners in the draft every year.
One specifically from Texas.
From
It's
Texas, yeah.
pretty fast.
So,
Shockingly fast, you might say.
yeah. I think depending on who you are and what team you are, I think that's where you got to go personally.
Every time something exciting happens, I feel like this sense of anxiety that I have to text you about it before you text me about it. Because I'll see something. It's happened twice now where I see something and I open my phone to text you about it, and your text is already there. I'm like, don't you have a job? Like, shouldn't you be doing something right now? Like, I want to share the news with you.